Yep, we're okay to start, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this session of the Economy and Resources Scrutiny Committee on Tuesday, the 19th of January. If we move straight on, we move on to the introductions and attendance at the meeting. Shirley, would you mind taking a roll call, please?
Yep, I've got Councillor Barch. Don't think it's on the call at the moment. Councillor Boddy?
Yes, here.
Councillor Cruddas?
Here.
Councillor Durham?
Here.
Councillor Harker?
Here.
Councillor Linda Hughes?
Here.
Councillor Jones, who isn't on the call at the moment. Councillor McEwen, the Mayor, isn't here. Councillor Paley is...
Hello.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Morning, Councillor Paley.
Hello.
Hi. Councillor Renton.
Here.
Councillor Tate.
Also here, Shirley.
Yeah, and we've got Elizabeth Davison, Assistant Director Resources, and there's two additional chairs in the meeting, Councillor Cindy Hughes and Councillor Curry.
Okay. Thank you,
Councillor Johnson.
Sorry, Councillor Johnson.
You got me down.
I've got you, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest to declare? Okay, none noted. If we move on to agenda item number 3, which is the medium-term plan, and it's to consider a response to Cabinet, taking into account the views of the scrutiny committees. Okay, I've invited the chairs from other scrutiny committees. You will have obviously seen the minutes from their meetings, the purpose of which is to consider any questions that we may like to ask, but then also it gives an opportunity for the chairs to maybe expand on the discussions they had within their meetings. So if I move straight on, and Councillor Renton, as Chair of the Communities and Local Services Scrutiny Committee, would you like to say any words?
Thank you, Chair. There's not a lot to say, really. After a discussion, we were happy with the recommendations, but I will, for members' interest, mention the additional information that was provided after the meeting. There was a question asked about 10% increase in bins across the town, and that would cost £25,000, and that would be a £15,000 per year service cost. And also the cost of fly tipping clearance in 2019-20 was £292,628, which is quite staggering, actually. So other than that, I'll pass back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Renton. I'll open it up to the floor. Does anybody have any questions for Councillor Renton? Okay, don't see any hands up at the moment. Just one. Councillor Boddy.
Could I just ask, is there any indication as to why that's so high, that 292,628 cost?
I can share the table with you. I've got the full breakdown of the costs.
I'd be grateful.
Yeah, it's probably, yeah, I'll get that shared with all councillors, because obviously it affects all wards and it is quite significant. So yeah, I'll get that shared.
Councillor Tate.
Thank you, Chair. Just in regards to that figure, I'd be interested to know what it was for the, maybe just to be able to look at it over a longer period of time. So what was the cost for it over the past 3 financial years? So prior to 2019-20, I'd like to know what it was previously, because it's fine looking at that figure and saying it's astronomical, which it is. However, if it's in line with what it's been previously, then that's probably the standard amount, isn't it?
Absolutely, I've already
But that
requested
doesn't take away the fact that we shouldn't be doing more about it. Another figure I'd be interested in is to know actually how much was the total fines issued in the same year for fly tipping.
Yeah, well, what I can do is I will share it with all members and I'll copy in the officers, and if you want to respond to that with any questions you have, that might be helpful. But I have
the first question that I've got is obviously to have the figures for the previous financial years as well.
That's already been requested, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tate. Thank you, Councillor Renton. This is maybe one for Elizabeth Davison. So in terms of the number that Councillor Renton has talked about, I'm assuming that's built into the budget ongoing. That position.
So sorry, I don't have the details of down to that granularity, but I would suspect if that's the figure that's being quoted, yes, that would be the one that's been built in. I apologise, I did actually leave Councillor Renton's meeting, I think, before this issue was discussed because it came under another matter. But yes, I've got no doubt it will be built in, but I can check that for you.
Thank you. Has anybody got any more questions? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Elizabeth?
Sorry, Councillor Durham, I just want to make sure I got your question right there. With regard, were you meaning with regard to the fly tipping, or did you mean with regard to the extra money for bins, extra bins?
Well, as far as I'm aware, the extra bins hasn't been built
No,
in.
That's what I was just going to say, no, that hasn't been built in. I was just confirming I've got my understanding of your question right. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Renton. Your report is obviously noted on your comments today. If we move on to health and housing, we got the chair for health and housing here today.
No, it's not on the call, Chair. Sorry.
Okay. We've got Councillor Cindy Hughes, chair of Children and Young People's Scrutiny Committee.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning.
Yes, the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee discussed the medium-term financial plan. You'll see the note from our meeting there. And as you would expect from a scrutiny committee, probably the main question was about the yearly increase in costs for children's services. We had a wide-ranging discussion about why that was the fact, that the budget continued to rise. And there were questions about the increase in numbers of children coming into care. The report that will be coming to Council next week highlights 302 children who are in the care of the local authority. And that is a high number. There was a discussion as to how we could learn from other authorities about best practice. And there was a pushback from some of the officers to indicate that we actually were in discussion and in pilot project work with other authorities. Leeds is an authority that we're learning very much from. So in relation to the budget, we had a discussion also about investing to save, in the sense that we have a large number of children in care, and many of them are outside of the local authority for appropriate care and attention. And we're finding ways to bring those children back to the authority, but that costs money. So the increase in the budget is a recognition of the fact that with the economic factors affecting our country and our region, as well as the COVID impact, that families are finding it very, very difficult to cope. And at least in the short term, there may be issues where families tumble into difficulty and their children need to be taken into care for their protection. So it's kind of a vector that, you know, we're learning things from other authorities, implementing new policies, and also learning through pilot projects. But we also have factors that are beyond the control of Darlington Borough Council, and families are tipping into difficulty. So as I say, we had a big discussion about that. There were questions about the implications of no increase in spending for voluntary sector, youth offending, antisocial behavior. And again, officers offered information about money that's coming from central government in regard to activities for young people. We're not quite sure how that will be rolled out here in Darlington, but there was an indication that although we would be spending less, that there would be ways that these needs could be met in our communities. At the end of the discussion, we had no formal recommendation to make on the medium-term financial plan. Excuse me. But committee did want to highlight our discussion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Again, I will open it up to the floor. Does anybody have any questions? I've got Councillor Curtis.
Yeah, it's not a question really. We also mentioned the two new facilities that we were opening up for children at Red Hall School and at Rice Car, which should give us some savings. So we're investing in some new classrooms and facilities for our children, which should allow us to bring some children back into education in Darlington, which should have some impact on the transport costs, which are extremely high for children and young people. I'm sorry, Cindy, you got most of the other things. That was the only one that I thought we might have, the committee might be interested in hearing, that's all.
Thank you, Councillor Curtis. Do we have any questions from anybody else? So just going back to obviously this best practice discussion that was had. Now, I naturally assume that the authority, it's an ongoing process of using best practice that can be learned from elsewhere, and I'm sure that other authorities learn from us as well. There's the 1.2 million, which I believe, which is the project with Leeds City Council. Are we aware of how much is left of that 1.2 million pot of funding?
I'm not. I can find that out for you, but it's all committed. So it's all committed. Most of it's in staff, and that's a commitment for the staff to pay the staff over the next year.
Okay. Okay. So just leaning on you a little bit here, Councillor Hughes. Obviously, all of your experience. Are there any particular areas where you feel that we maybe aren't applying best practice?
Well, Chair, I have not discussed that with committee, and I'm here representing the views of the committee today. So I'm not really in a position to discuss that with you. I think that the appointment of a new director of people will galvanize the way forward. I have to say that over the past 3 years, there's been an acceleration of our desire to use best practice, and there's been an incredible economic investment in that project. So I'm grateful to Economic and Resources Committee for supporting that as someone who is dedicated to the well-being of children and young people in Darlington. And I hope that this committee will continue to do that, not only as corporate parents, but also as those who are given the task of scrutinizing the budget, probably more so than any other committee in relation to the balancing of the needs and requirements of the borough. So in regard to that, I'd just like to go back to the rising numbers of looked after children. I have to say that we're not outliers in that you know, our regional comparators, as well as our comparators, should have had a cup of water next to me, sorry, that, you know, this is happening across the country. And we actually have plans in place, we as an authority, to, as Councillor Cruddas said, try to bring children and young people back to Darlington where appropriate and where we can supply the best for their needs.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on. We've got the Chair of Adult Scrutiny, Councillor Curry.
Yes, hello. The main point is that this is like the Children's Services, is a fluid budget, well, fluid uptake of budget. Most of it goes on staffing and care home facilities where needed. The reablement unit is being streamlined. The money for that has been reduced, but it's still offering a very good service. That was questioned quite a bit at the scrutiny, and we are all happy that the people, the elderly people of Darlington and the special needs adults will be catered for and not be left wanting.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Again, I'll open it up to the floor. Any questions? Okay. I must apologise, Councillor Curry. The re-enablement unit. Could you just explain what that is?
That is when people are referred to because they've either had a fall or an operation or surgery or an illness that makes them less able to be independent, and they're put through a system to different for each individual. Some people never get completely back to square one, but they practically everybody makes a fairly good improvement and can either go back to the care home or back to their own individual homes with support.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Curry. Just finally to the floor. Has anybody got any questions? Okay. None noted. Thank you, Councillor Curry.
Thank you.
And thank you to the chairs who have come along today. If you do so, feel free to leave the meeting. Thank you. Okay. So obviously the Economy and Resources Scrutiny Committee, we convened on the 6th of January to discuss the MTFP. We've obviously had just over a week, well, nearly 2 weeks now, to ponder that. Just going back to the minutes, does anybody have any comments associated with the minutes of that meeting? Okay.
Councillor Harker, Chair.
Oh, right. Okay. Councillor Harker. Sorry, there was just a message popped up. I didn't know who that was from. Councillor Harker.
Thank you. I'm not sure whether to raise it as a question or just on the back of the minutes, but I'll do it here. It's as good as anywhere else. In the minutes is reference to, I think we talked a little bit about the use of reserves over the lifetime of the MTFP. And I think everyone understands the reasons for that. The question I wanted to ask was that, and we also talked about this, that in terms of council being able to make any long-term decisions this year, we're hindered by the fact that because of COVID, the fair funding review hasn't happened and we've been given a single year settlement from the government. So it's clear to us that we need to do things, but it's equally clear that we're not in a position probably to make long-term financial decisions because we're not really in having the full facts before us. The question I have, or the comment I have, is about the use of reserves. So clearly we got support from government for loss of income, additional expenditure because of COVID, and that has helped. But the situation we're in is that rather than being able to make decisions this year about the budget and the longer term, we're effectively having to roll forward a budget based on roughly grants that we got from government being the same last year as we're getting this year. To enable us to do that, we're facing another year of having to use our reserves. And I think when I looked at it in the current MTFP, over the 4 years, we're using something like £13.9 million worth of reserves. Last year's budget, we were using £10.8 million of reserves. So we've got an additional year with additional use of reserves. And I think I just wanted to understand correctly, although we still have some reserves to enable us to do that, the longer that we go forward by not being able to make long-term decisions about our budget, we are slowly eating away at our reserves, and we are, in effect, inexorably moving towards a cliff edge of having no reserves, which is never a good place to be. But given that we are using those reserves to manage the budget to continue ticking along, once those reserves are gone, we will have to make a decision whether we're in a position to do so or not. And I think I just wanted to be, I suppose the question I'm asking is, am I correct in that we are yet again slowly eating into the reserves, and at some point we will have to make a decision, even if we're unable to do so because of government being able to give us long-term finance figures for this local authority in terms of its grants from government.
Chair, am I okay to take that one?
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, Councillor Harker, we are using reserves. It's a strategy we've used for a number of years now. I'm not concerned that we are using more reserves at the moment, because in last year's MTFP, we thought at the end of year 4 we'd have about £3.5 million. And we're still doing the same for the new one. So we've actually been able to roll it forward another year without utilising any more reserves. And actually, in the settlement, we've got a little bit more money than we thought we were going to get. So I think that reserve figure at the end of year 4 is actually going to be higher. The principle of what you're saying is absolutely correct, of course, that we can't continue using reserves forever. But for the last few years, because of innovations, because of economic development, we've been able to balance it more and keep those reserves. So we've been able to carry it forward an extra year. And I mean, that's the strategy, the economic growth strategy. I think when we were talking last time about using reserves, and I'd said that because of COVID, we didn't have the fair funding review, and therefore it probably wouldn't be prudent to make any decisions at looking at cutting services at this point when we didn't know what future funding we'd have in the future. I think that still stands. But with regard to the reserves position, yeah, if you look at last year's MTFP and the new one, we haven't used those reserves as we thought we were going to do. In fact, this year, I think 21-22, we're saying we're going to actually, when the new MTFP comes out, if you take the COVID out, we would actually have saved some money in that year. So if we carry on with our innovations, carry on with our creativity, carry on with our economic growth, hopefully we'll be able to get to a point whereby each year is more sustainable, so we will be able to use less reserves over the years. I don't know if that makes sense.
Thank you. It does. If I may, Chair, I suppose the point I'm making is that, and I think the report does say this, we are in a precarious position with the budget because there's lots and lots of unknowns that we've got absolutely no control over. And to some extent, we've been fortunate this year. Some of it has been fortunate by design. Some of it's been fortunate by, being honest about it, luck. The longer we go forward, relying on good fortune, be it of our own making or not our own making, the greater the longer term risk of us getting to a point where that luck runs out and we find ourselves in a very difficult position. So I'm not saying that we're in a position this year to make wholesale changes to our budget because there are lots of uncertainties. The point I'm really making is that there is only so much time we can rely on luck, as I said, be it of our own making or not, to keep going forward using reserves. And it's just, I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that there is a risk sitting there of use of reserves, and that at some point we will have to address it. And given one of the outcomes of COVID may be a downturn in the economy, the ability of government to support local authorities financially is probably looking less and less likely, certainly in the short term, because there'll probably be far greater structural things they need to do to our economy, and local authorities won't be very high up the list in the short term. And therefore, the reality is that, going forward, we are in a very precarious position. And I do think that we need to be crystal clear about that as a committee.
Thank you, Councillor Harker. And I would wholeheartedly agree on that. Going back to Elizabeth Davidson's comment there through innovations, and she mentioned their savings of being able to materialise year on year, and obviously being able to therefore kick that can down the road. But I do agree at some point, hopefully there will be this fair funding review, so we do have a solid base to move forward. I'll bring in Councillor McEwen.
You're on mute, Councillor McEwen.
My apologies, Chair, before I start, for my lateness before I ask a question. This is probably, Chair, for Elizabeth Davison. in terms of budget and council tax and the social care element, we've maxed that, but charges seem to have from examination remained fairly static with no increases. I accept there may be market conditions that may, for some of the charges, that may have driven that. Just trying to understand what the rationale was for that, Chair.
Yes, each of obviously the charges, some of them are statutory, some of them are local decisions, and I know that Chair had actually gone back and checked on some of those, and most of them are regarding to leisure and culture, and each individual manager looks at their portfolio and has a look to see whether they think they can increase the charges and how much by, given market conditions. So they were the recommendations that came from the officers, and I know that the scrutiny committees have looked at those.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, has anybody else got any comments or questions? Got Councillor McEwen again.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. One observation would be that in reading the papers and the minutes, the climate change agenda or the green agenda is and apologies, people can shout me down. I can only see one reference to it, and what I wanted to say is, given the focus that we as an authority have on climate change, and certainly the term has been used, a golden thread, or it's part of our plan, and Elizabeth will be amazed. I know the definition of a budget, which is a plan for a given time period expressed in financial terms. Should we not expect to see reference to climate change and the green agenda more prevalent in some of the minutes and the discussions in various scrutiny committees?
I think to be honest, I think that is a valid point based on the way that the reporting and the management has been dispersed. But I obviously can't comment, but I'm assuming that it's embedded. There isn't a specific budget at this moment in time. Is that correct, Elizabeth?
Yes, Councillor Durham. And forgive me, in one of the scrutiny committees, this was discussed. I'm thinking, Councillor Renton, was it in your committee? I know there was something raised with regard to climate change, and I know that the leader was aware of this. So I believe there will be something going in the budget for climate change. Yes.
Chair, may I come back?
Of course.
Is that okay? And I think that's positive. That I think the point I'm trying to make is it's not all about money, and there may be other activities within all of our departments that contribute to that agenda. So I accept that it may be implied. The point I was trying to make is, should it be more explicit?
Well, personally, I do think that is a valid comment, Councillor McEwen. I am aware that obviously the authority is acquiring electric vehicles. There's a number of things that are happening at this moment in time. There's obviously efficient heating, which is going into various buildings. Maybe it is something that we should be shouting more about. We've got Councillor Tate.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on Councillor McEwen's questions about the budget and money allocated to climate change. In yesterday's reconvene of the Climate Change Cross-Party Working Group, Heather mentioned there's £1 million in housing for climate change. She also mentioned that there's been sign-off from the MTFP for the working group itself of 100k. So that's there somewhere.
Chair, could I take that?
Please.
Just to confirm, Councillor Tate, there is in the HRA, there was £1 million put aside for climate change in the housing revenue account. And yes, I hadn't wanted to mention the figure because I didn't know it was public, but obviously the £100,000 will be in the new TFP. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I've got Councillor Cruddas.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, it was interesting the other day when we had the presentation about the opportunities we have from electricity generation off council house roofs and the like, and also in the new design specification that's been put out for the Bertree Garden Village. You know, the climate change items are very high in the design requirements. So I think the people have taken it on board, and I was quite surprised that, particularly from the presentation the other day, what an opportunity there is for us to actually make some big strides, particularly if we can spread out the electricity generating idea to private housing. It's a major opportunity, and I think everyone's gradually picking up the ball and trying to run with it, which is great news, really. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Curtis. Councillor McEwen.
Yeah, thank you. And just to respond to that, I'm not saying it's not there. I'm just saying it's not explicitly stated, and from this discussion, you know, it's clear that there's stuff going on, so it's more implied. But may I raise another question, please, Chair?
Yeah, of course.
It's one of the drums that I bang is around our core mission is improving health, wealth and happiness. Everything that we do should be seeking to improve the health and well-being of local people. I'm sure we would all agree with that. A bit motherhood and apple pie, but nonetheless. And again, I think going back to the climate change discussion around, it's not explicitly, you know, in bold, underlined within each committee. Are we missing some tricks, do you think, particularly in the current context of what we are going through, both for physical and mental health issues for the people of Darlington, to be more explicit around health and well-being in all budget lines and their ability to contribute to improving health and well-being and reducing health inequalities? i.e., it's not just public health and health who have a responsibility for health and well-being, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. Just a question for Elizabeth. How, you know, I'm obviously looking at this from, predominantly it's a numbers document. How would that be able to manifest itself within the wording of the report?
I would need to give that some thought, Councillor Doyle.
Okay. Appreciate it wouldn't be easy. Okay. Does anybody else have any comments, any questions? Okay. Right, there is just something, and apologies, I should have shared this with the group. There was a question that I asked in and around the increase in charges for junior swimming and concessions, and it was increasing way above the rate of inflation. And we'll have had some feedback, thankfully, from officers through Elizabeth, and it looks as though the overall increase would increase the revenue by around about £4,000. Now, looking at it, that equates to around about 250 swims a week. So what I'm proposing to make a recommendation to Cabinet, it is just a small proposal, but is that we keep the fees at the current level. They are way below what our neighbours are within the TVCA, but I just think it's the right thing to do at this moment in time, especially as we come out of COVID. Fingers crossed. Councillor Renton.
So I was just putting my hand up to say 100% behind that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Renton.
Second that.
Councillor Tate and Councillor Boddy.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Councillor Tate.
I was just going to say that I haven't got the detail behind it, so I wouldn't know what I was agreeing to.
No, totally understand that. And as I
Apart
say,
from a blanket statement of don't put the fees up.
yeah, within the MTFP, there was a proposal to increase the charges for children swimming from I think it was £2.55 to £3, and then concessions from £2.25 to £2.50. Now, I just didn't feel it was appropriate because it was way above the rate of inflation, and what we should be doing is when we come out of COVID, we should be encouraging children to lead an active and healthy life and in a safe environment, which would be a swimming pool, compared to obviously opportunities which are there for children elsewhere to go swimming. And the cost of that would be £4,000. Councillor Hughes.
Just to say that I completely agree. Following on from Councillor McEwen's comments about health and well-being, and it just all fits in with that. It just sort of, it's a bit of a slap in the face if we then go and put the most accessible sport available in the town to young people up by that amount.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. I'll have Councillor Harkin, then Councillor Johnson, and then we'll look to wrap up.
Thank you, Chair. It's on the similar topic. I was struggling to look at the report and I can't find it. Was it only the children's and concessionary elements were being proposed for an increase, or were the adults' full swimming fee having a similar increase?
No, if I remember rightly, and I'll just go back to the report, it was the children's which had the major increase, but there was an incremental. Yeah, so adult swim was £3.85 to £3.90. So it was a 5p increase. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Johnson.
Sorry, this has not been to Cabinet. I would like to meet with Elizabeth and we talk this through and see whether there is a very clear way forward on resolving it. I tend to agree with the sentiments here.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Okay, taken on board the conversations that we've had this morning and the comments from the various scrutiny committees, and obviously the discussions that we've had. Are we in agreement with the council tax increase of 1.99% plus a 3% adult and social care precept to help fund social care for 2021 and 2022? Can I have a show of hands? So that's
Chair. So I'll put my hand up to speak rather than if I.
That's fine, Councillor Hark. I'll let you in, and then we will wrap up.
Thank you. I think the committee does need to make the point that we probably need to say more at Cabinet and at Council, but I think in some ways that this committee needs to reflect on the fact that it's an increase of nearly 5%. And the reality is, I don't think the council really has much choice about this. We are, by the government, suggesting that we need to apply that levy, that we are underfunded in terms of adult social care. If we don't raise it, it'll have a huge impact on some of the most vulnerable people in our communities. Do I think it's right that we're raising it by 5%? Clearly, I don't suppose anyone on the committee would agree with raising tax above inflation. I'm waffling because I don't really know what to suggest, but I do think in what we feed back to Cabinet, we do need to make the point somewhere along the line that a 5% increase is going to make it difficult for some of our residents, particularly this year when many people have lost their jobs because of the economic downturn. You know, we know that there are many people who are struggling financially, and of all years, to have to raise council tax way above inflation is going to be particularly difficult for some of our residents. And I think for the committee simply to say in a banal way that we agree to raising it without some context to that statement, I think would be remiss of the committee.
Okay, I take on board that comment. Councillor Renton, I'll just bring Councillor Renton in and I'll reply.
No, my hand was up from when you asked if we all agreed. Apologies.
Okay. I think we've got two elements here, haven't we? We've got a council tax increase and then we've got a precept. So I think if we discuss the two points, does anybody have any comments with regards to a 1.99% increase in council tax? Is anybody against an increase in 1.99% in council tax? Now, I know that it is above the rate of inflation, but it does take into account the increase in cost to the council. Councillor Body? You're on mute, Councillor Body.
As a new councillor who's only been in office for 18 months, my basic understanding of the situation is that we rely on central government for some of our funding. And in that sense, we could look to central government for a better settlement. That I think is the sentiment that I've seen in the wider community in the town.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Is anybody else? Councillor Cruddas?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think that, you know, regardless of where the money comes from, it's taxpayers that pay it, you know, that whether they get it from a local tax or a national tax, you know, we've got to shell out. And I think most people in the town will be quite happy to pay the elevated council tax to help with social care. And I think the way that the benefits support system works is that our most vulnerable people, and I know it won't apply to everyone, but generally our most vulnerable people will be supported by other benefits, so that the impact of the council tax rise may not be as severe on them as might be first realised by the sort of the headline figure. So I think there's not really a lot of alternative, and I don't think that it's such a great problem for the people that are already supported with benefits when they can't pay. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cruddas. Councillor Tate?
Thanks, Chair. Just in regards to the increases themselves, is as a committee or as like a body of members, we're not really presented with alternatives. We're just given like, well, the increase is going to be 1.99% because that's what the officers have worked on. So if I was presented with alternatives, I would be able to do like weigh them up, but we're not. We're just given a budget which includes the rise. Yeah, that's my only comment really.
Elizabeth Davison?
Thank you, Chair. Just to respond to that, I just wanted to be clear, this is actually Cabinet's budget, not officers. So Cabinet, we work with Cabinet closely, and they were the rises that they were comfortable with. We also sent a spreadsheet out to all members, I believe, which showed, I think it might be from this committee, which showed how the impact of council tax at different levels would affect the bottom line of the budget, and therefore what savings would need to be made. So it was just to let you know that. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Councillor Renton.
Thank you, Chair. It was just following on from what Councillor Curtis said about a lot of people would probably be happy with the increase. I was interested if we've ever actually done any consultation, or obviously to go up to 2% you have to have a referendum. I'm assuming we've never had a referendum, because I don't think I've ever heard anyone say, yeah, I'd be happy with a council tax increase. So I just thought, have we ever, you know, asked the question?
Chair, I can take that. No, we haven't ever gone above the referendum limit, because exactly for that reason we thought it could cost quite a lot of money to do it, because it's like an election. And I think this is from memory. Someone said it could cost nearly £100,000 to run an election, and I could be wrong, so please don't quote me on that one. But we're pretty sure what the answer would be. So it might have been a moving exercise. So it hasn't actually been done. No.
Okay.
Thank you. It was done in Brighton once, I think, and it was just refused. I think that was the only local authority that's ever tried to do it. Thank you.
Councillor Harker, I'll bring you back in.
Thank you, Chair. It's just on the question that Councillor Renton's raised about, do we ever ask the public? I would agree with Elizabeth. In a formal sense, I think it's quite rare for local authorities to have done it. I thought it was Bristol. I could be wrong.
No,
but
probably,
and the
yes,
only reason I know it's because my sister happens to live in Bristol, and the context was, it was some years ago, and from recollection, the council went out to residents and offered 3 levels of council tax. And basically the message was, this is the lowest. If we do this, we'll spend the money on this. If we do the highest level, we'll spend the money on this. And essentially what they were promising to do, the maximum level, they would spend the money on education. And they were told no, residents wanted the lowest amount. So even when residents were being said, you know, we're going to spend it on your children's future, they got 2 fingers back from the public. So I'm pretty clear in my mind that if you ask people, would you like an extra tax increase, most people are going to say no, thank you very much, because it's human nature to. And I think that's the difficulty of going out to a referendum like that, is even if you've got a cast iron thing about we're going to spend money on a really, really worthy cause, many people look to their own purse and think I can't afford it and say sorry, no, even if it's done with the best will in the world. So yeah, I disagree with Councillor Curtis in that most people will accept an increase that's way above inflation, because people won't. You know, some people are selfish, some people can't afford it, but the reality is people won't accept anything other than, well, they won't really accept even inflationary increases because people don't.
Thank you, Councillor Harker. I think the comment what I would make goes alongside what you just said there, Councillor Harker. But going back to where we are at this moment in time, when we do look at the MTFP and the fluidity of the situation, the uncertainty at this moment in time, I absolutely concur that there will need to be a review at some moment in time in terms of council services. But I think, you know, personally and through this committee, I think what we should be looking to do is pushing Cabinet for, in 2021, as 5 years after the last public consultation, we do go back to the public, because we may potentially be in a totally different environment than what we were a couple of years ago. People have different demands, and people may be happy to pay a different rate of council tax based on exactly what they want for the borough. Okay, so going back, can I please have a show of hands in terms of the council tax increase of 1.99% plus a 3% adult and social care precept? Do we have anyone who's in agreement with that increase? Have a show of hands, please. I've got one person who's in agreement. Who disagrees with that increase? I've got nobody. Right, okay, let's make this easier. Who disagrees with the increase in council tax of 1.99% and 3% adult and social care?
I think, Chair, for me, it's not as clear cut as that. It's, as I said before, I think that there needs to be context in that support, reflecting on the fact that there are some people that increase, particularly this year, and that's why I'd raise it now, is it is going to be very difficult for some people to find the money for that increase. And yet, on the other hand, quite clearly, without that increase, some of the services that we provide, possibly to the very same people who are vulnerable, we would have to make significant cuts, not to raises. So,
well, I'm happy to take that on board. So I'll take that back to the committee. Who agrees with Councillor Harker's comments? So we're either going to have a majority view or we're going to have a minority view on this. Okay, so I have Councillor Harker, Hughes and Paley, and so that is your minority view on this proposal. So we take it as the majority view is to increase, but we will take your comments on board, Councillor Harker, in the reply to Cabinet.
Thank you.
Okay, and an agreement to the schedule of charges. Do we have anybody who disagrees with those schedule of charges? Obviously, Councillor Johnson is going to pick up the swimming side separately.
Well, it's a recommendation from the committee as per, I forget whether it's yourself said or Councillor Venton about the concession and junior swims that we recommend. Did it not be increased?
I thought this was something that could be picked up outside of the recommendation to Cabinet. Would that be correct, Elizabeth?
I think if Scrutiny want to put that forward to Cabinet, that would be a fair point to put forward to Cabinet. Fine. Because I know Councillor Johnson and myself could have a talk about it, but it would be going to Cabinet just as a recommendation. It doesn't necessarily mean Cabinet would have to change its mind. So, if you know what I mean. So I think it's quite easy for you to put in as your recommendation, yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that reminder, Councillor Harker. I'll make that recommendation to the committee. Is everybody in agreement? Thank you. And we support the continuation of the Futures Fund into 2024 and 2025. Is anybody in disagreement with that? Okay. That's all of the work of this committee for this morning. Just finally, does anybody have any comments, any questions they'd like to ask? It's not on the agenda, but it's... Okay. Councillor McKeown.
It's not on the agenda, but if you haven't booked up for my virtual Burns night, there is a watch only option for those that don't like haggis. We've closed the meal orders now. £12. You will hear from the Mother Club, the oldest Burns club in the world, and also a top class comedian, not me, as well as a quiz, and it's for St Teresa's Hospice and the Mayor's Charity. So I've only got two councillors, I think, and that's Councillor Keir, who is my brother-in-arms nationally, not politically, and I think Councillor Cindy Hughes might be involved. But feel free to click on the link. And apologies for taking us off book or off piece, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. I may struggle to attend, but I'll put some money's worth in.
Oh, you are a star.
Yeah. Yeah, I will record it anyway, just to see if anybody has a little bit too much to drink. Councillor Renton.
Thank you, Chair. Just as asking if as a committee we get an opportunity to vote on that price decrease, or is that? Yeah, I'm messing. That's fine.
No, sorry, Councillor Renton. I asked if anybody disagreed. Nobody did. Okay, thank you very much everybody for attending. Have a nice morning and stay safe.